Hi, this is David. In the last couple of videos, I showed you how to handle exceptions in a Java Spring Boot application. And the pattern for this is simply to add try-catch, wrap your things up in a try-catch block, things that might actually throw an exception, and you can catch for built-in Java exceptions like arithmetic exception or this kind of catch-all exception class here, and in there put some code to handle that exception to create and then in this case return something that's going to be appropriate for an error. You can do that for built-in ones, or up above here I have some custom exceptions. This missing arguments exception, that's one that I've created to handle if there's something missing in the body of the expected request. And this is good. This is fine. It works. It actually works. However, it does have a disadvantage in that if you have a lot of these, then you could have your exception handling code scattered in lots of places throughout the application. And a lot of times you might have to duplicate it. So for example, if you wanted to catch this arithmetic exception in 20 different methods, well, you'd have to copy and paste this code into 20 different places. And if you want to change that, that's 20 different places you have to maintain it. So what I'm going to show you now is something called the ControllerAdvice pattern. And this tool is built into the Spring framework, so you can use it right out of the box. And all I need to do is to add a new file. I'll call it GC ControllerAdvice. I can call it whatever I want. .java. Right here, it'll be a class. That's fine. And then I need to decorate that class with ControllerAdvice right there. I press tab to auto-complete it, and you can see that it imported part of the Spring framework where the ControllerAdvice lives. And then now within that, what I want to do is add some methods that are specific to handling errors. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to handle this error right here, the arithmetic exception. And the code for that, I've got it right in here, is here. What I want to do is I want to have a message and then generate this divide numbers output, which is just a, if I look at that, that's just a model class that has a couple of properties, quotient and message, and there's a constructor to set those right there. So if you're dividing numbers, you want to get the quotient, which should be when you're dividing the numerator by the denominator, and then the message, which for errors will be actually an error message to return to the user. So that's what I'm going to do here in my ControllerAdvice method. Is I'm going to return a response entity because that's what I've done. Right here, I want to return a response entity that contains this divide numbers output, and that's the divide numbers output right there, and then the HTTP status. It won't be OK, it'll actually be a 400 is what I want to return. So let's do that. So here, I'm going to build up a message. It'll be math error followed by whatever this, I'm going to return a response entity that contains this model, and it doesn't really matter what I name it here, but this is a nice convention. It's an arithmetic exception handler, and it will accept an argument of an exception of type arithmetic exception. So then I'm going to create a method here that'll include the error message from my exception, and then I want to build up this model here. I'll need a control dot to import where that's from to get rid of that squiggly line, and that's in the constructor. I say I want to return a null and this message up here, math error followed by whatever that message is, and then I want to return a new response entity, so I'll control dot here to import where that is, and it'll in the body we'll have this divide numbers output, which is this thing that I created right above it, and the HTTP status. I'll need to import this one right here, the org.spring framework. This bad request is an HTTP 400, which says that there was a problem with this. So this method right here, I want it to be called whenever there is an exception of type arithmetic exception. And the way that I do that is I have to decorate this method with a couple of things. I'm going to decorate it with response body. Need to import that. Tell it that it's an exception handler specifically for exceptions of type arithmetic exception. In this part, I don't really need this right here. If I was just going to return a string, then I maybe could return, make sure that it returns that. But actually, I'm explicitly saying the status is 400 right here. It doesn't hurt to leave it in there, but since I'm returning a response entity that has a status in its header, then I don't really need that. And this is it. And now, wherever I have this try catch, I can get rid of it, and I can replace it with just simply this code right here, and get rid of that. And now I don't need any try catch in here. I don't have to handle my errors inside of here, so which makes the code a whole lot cleaner and much easier to read. So what I'll do now is I'll start debugging here. And once my application has started up right here, then I can call this. And this is a post to divide numbers, and I have to add some JSON and pass in this thing called a divide numbers input, which is another model here that has a first number, a second number. It says divide this by that, and then there's also a name being passed in there as well. Which for this, I'm not really going to use that. So what I can do then is I'll tell you what, I'll set a couple breakpoints here. I'm going to just to prove this is happening. So there's no try catch in here. So when I call this, yeah, I'll hit this. I'll try to do this, but if I try to divide by 0, it should throw an exception. And rather than that exception getting caught here in the catch block, I want that exception to be caught in here. So I'll set a breakpoint right there. So let's do that. Here we are. This is divide numbers, and in the body, I'm going to say 100 divided by 0. And if I do that, then I've hit this block breakpoint right here. It's going to try to divide by 0. I'll resume it, and what do you know? It got caught right in here because an error of type arithmetic exception was thrown. This is what my global handler for that type of exception is, and it just takes care of it. It says, okay, my message is math error : / by 0 divide by 0. I want to wrap that up into this numbers outputs because there's a message and the quotient, making sure that's null, and that's what I'm going to return. I'll wrap that up in a response entity with HTTP 400 or baud request return. So go back here and you can see right here that's exactly what I got. I got a 400 back, and in the body of the response I got this quotient, null, and message math error : / by 0. And I can do the same thing with all sorts of other exceptions. If I want to copy this and do the same thing with just a generic exception class, then I want to make sure that these are all the way I expect them to be. Make sure the message is appropriate, and that should work for an exception. And I can do it also for what do I have up here in the controller? I think I had missing arguments exception. So any one of these things, I can add specific error handlers for each one of these types of exceptions that I expect to get. Exception, missing args, error, and all that stuff. I may want to do something special for some of these here. This is a pretty basic error handling, but this is how I would work it for all the expected errors that I might have. And because I have this kind of fallback, the exception class, I should probably put that down either at the bottom or the top to indicate that that's sort of the exception of last resort. Then this really should handle any kind of exceptions that happen within Java. And by doing that, I can simplify my code by eliminating a lot of this stuff in here. So, for example, right now I am checking to see if in the add numbers method, I want to see if person name is null. Then I return this stuff here. If the person name is like Bob is, I guess, not allowed there. And then also if I have a missing arguments exception here. So what I can do is get rid of this stuff here. I don't need that anymore. I'll just delete it. I won't comment it out. I can get rid of that. I can get rid of this try catch here. All this stuff right here. And instead, I'll just say throw new missing arguments exception and pass out that message right here. Here, and this math service deep down inside of this add numbers, that also might throw an exception. If I look in here, then if it's missing something, then it will throw an exception if the first or second number are missing right here. So there's three different areas here. The Swiggy line says that in Java, if I could have an exception that could happen, then I must add that to the declaration right here. So I need to have this throws missing arguments exception. That's a rule in Java. So right here I can do that. What else can I do? I have in my ControllerAdvice, I'm handling this one, I'm handling missing arguments, and I'm handling the generic exception. So I can get rid of that code down here. Looks like I've already got rid of that code. So let's get rid of all this here and go ahead and start debugging. So now what should happen is if it tests for the person name is missing, or I guess if Bob is a bad one, this would be a missing argument session here. Probably should have a special one just for that, but here in add numbers, that might throw an exception if I'm missing the first or the second numbers. All these things here are available, and any one of those things, if they're a problem, they should hit this controller right here, or this method right here, because it's listening for missing arguments exception here in my ControllerAdvice. So I've set a few breakpoints in here. It's running. I'm going to go in here and say, here's my add numbers. This is all good. 1, 2, and David. If I hit that right here, then yeah, I hit the breakpoint, but everything should be great there, and I should get some nice, 3, the sum is 3, David. But if, for example, I'm missing the person name in my input, then you can see right now person name is null, so I'm going to throw an exception right there, and it is caught then by this method in the ControllerAdvice, and it should say something like missing args error and then the error message itself. And there it is, missing args error, missing input, person name is required. And then I told it should be null, and should return a 400. So there's null for the quotient, and there's 400 right here. Come back in here and do something similar for eliminate first number. That hits a different part of the code. That check is actually done down inside of this add numbers right here, where it's going to throw that custom exception right here, and it doesn't matter where it's thrown, I'm still caught by this exact same method. Quotient is null, missing args error, some detail in that message. it's 400. So here's a good example of how I didn't have to have that same code repeated in multiple parts of my application. I could put it in one place and just handle it there. In this video, I've shown you how to use ControllerAdvice to handle exceptions in an elegant way in a single spot where you can maintain it all in this one spot and simplify your code as a result. This is David. Thank you for watching.